to see our advertisements, but like we mentioned, we're really focusing on the hope, and we wanted to do something different this year going along with that theme. So we've partnered with the Butterfly Project, with this, which is this amazing project that commemorates the children that were lost in the Holocaust. And they do so in this beautiful way where we sent out butterflies to anybody who registered. And if you haven't yet, please feel free to do so after this event. I will explain it a little bit more after the video. But basically using the butterfly as a symbol of hope. That there's obviously what happened in the Holocaust was a horrible atrocity, but that we're going to remember that as long as humankind is around, there's still hope. There's always promise for a better tomorrow. And that is the goal of this project. I'd like to share with you a short video screen of their presentation, and I think it'll set the tone for what we're trying to do here today. So just bear with me for 1 second here. Alan, I think you have to make me back into either a co-host or in order to share my screen.
You are now a co-host.
Okay, let's try that. There we go. Okay, and of course, thank you to everybody for your patience. We're still Zooming a year later, so I think we've gotten a lot better, but it's still wonderful to have everybody's patience. Okay, let's see, here we go. All right. Let's just get that big for you guys up here. Okay.
But this was later on because we were in the camp, 15,000 children. And I have
Hitler wanted to kill all the Jews in Europe. Not many people believed he would really do this, so no one stopped him. He rounded them all up and loaded them onto trains, and locked them in horrible places called concentration camps. There was no way anyone could escape. The life they used to have was gone. One of these camps was in Czechoslovakia, and it was called Theresienstadt, or Terezín in the Czech language. Terezín was actually a town built inside of a fortress, so it didn't look like the other camps with rows and rows of barracks. And it wasn't a typical concentration camp. It was a ghetto camp. People were sick and starving and forced to do hard labor like slaves. Some prisoners were tortured and killed, but staying there was better than being put on a train to the east, where no one ever came back.
Terezin was unique in that there were many people from the arts and the sciences and universities crowded together with all these children. And it was decided that to keep the children busy and to keep them up to grade level, they would teach the children. And that was forbidden by the Nazis.
In 1943, a woman named Friedel Dicker Brandeis arrived. She decided to bring mostly art supplies in her suitcase. She was a very talented artist and a teacher from the Bauhaus, which everyone knew was the most famous place for artists to train in all of Europe.
People like Friedel used art for good, to give the children hope, to help them express their feelings, to cope with this shock and the fear. The power of art in a dreadful place, in a concentration camp, and to do it against all odds, because it was a powerful form of resistance.
Friedel stuffed almost 5,000 children's drawings and paintings and poetry into 2 suitcases and hid them at Terezin. These artworks were discovered after the war and were published in a book of art and poetry.
I first read this poem, The Butterfly, because a book had been published called I Never Saw Another Butterfly.
The last, the very last. So richly, brightly, dazzlingly yellow. That butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live in here, in the ghetto.
And you were in 2nd grade, and now look at you, you're in 5th grade.
This is Jan Landau. She's a teacher at San Diego Jewish Academy. She wanted to find a new way to teach about the Holocaust.
So I thought that there has to be a way that we can have at school something that's not scary, because it's a really scary time in our history, right? A really scary time. My son attended here. His grandparents are Holocaust survivors. We were the largest Jewish day school in San Diego. We had nothing here to remind children of how really lucky they are. I felt it was very important, and I got the go-ahead to pursue my idea. And I had some wires on my desk, so I started forming a butterfly. And I needed someone who could help me, who was an artist. I'm Cheryl. Hi, I'm Jan.
Cheryl kind of froze inside when Jan asked her to help. She never thought she'd want to work on a project about the Holocaust. But Jan convinced her to try.
Think about it. You can handle it. I have to tell you, I'm counting on you. I mean, I just admire your work.
And she pulled out an example of what she created in the shape of a butterfly. She said to me, we'd like to have 1.5 million butterflies. And what do you think? And I looked at this vitamin pill wrapped in wires, and I just had this reaction. We can't do it like that. When Jan and I were sitting in her office, I felt like I wanted to solve a problem for her. But the way Holocaust education was delivered to me as a child in Hebrew school was just awful. We were just not prepared, but we were thrown at these black and white reels of footage. And then I remember nobody helping us to process it. How could this happen? I don't want to think about it.
This is Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego. It can hold almost 70,000 people. You would have to fill it more than 21 times to equal the number of children killed in the Holocaust.
You remember a terrible thing in your history, but you have to have hope that things will get better.
So Jan and Cheryl and a handful of volunteers got to work, making butterflies from clay. It didn't take long for them to realize how much there was to do, and that they were going to need a lot more help.
And we got to figure out a way to be more organized.
Right.
The word started to spread beyond the school and their inner circle of volunteers. People they didn't even know were catching the spirit of the project, and soon butterflies were showing up from all over.
And I mean, this is like one of the best parts of our lives is when a box comes in.
One day, they brought the butterfly project to the Jewish Community Center. A group of Holocaust survivors were there that day, and something amazing happened.
We were passing by, and you asked if you would be interested to paint butterflies, and in memory of the 1,000,005 children, and hang them on the walls at the academy. But I told you, this is going to go over. When I met you and when you said the purpose of it and the butterflies, it's nothing that kids would look at that they get sad. And this, to me, was my excitement because, you know, if they show pictures, sad pictures, kids run away from it.
The reality is these survivors are getting very old and we're losing them.
Nice meeting you.
Hi, my name is Maya. Nice meeting you.
You all heard of Kristallnacht. That was the beginning of the end of the Jewish people in Europe, in fact. And the synagogues burned from the 9th to the 10th of November at night. It was a terrible time. 30,000 men went to concentration camps.
We had to wear Jewish stars, and this is where the identification came in. We had to sign them. You see a big J, which means for Jews.
We were awakened and ordered to get ready for the train. No one knew where we were going. But when we saw the cattle cars, we realized we are being shipped to a concentration camp.
I never forget the day when I met Dr. Mengele. They called him the angel of death. He was no angel, but he pointed my mom to the left, my sister to the right, and he grabbed me and looked at me and he said, "You're gonna see your mother very soon."
From August of 1943 till September 1941, 1 year. And from that time, from September to December, I was in Birkenau.
So when we arrived in Birkenau, I asked the first inmate, "When will I see my mother?" And she pointed at the chimney, and fire was coming out of the chimney. And she said to me very coldly, "Your mother is burning there. You better talk about her in past tense."
So we are in Auschwitz in Birkenau, in this horrible, horrible place, and somebody's calling out my name, Rosie. My Jewish name is Rosie. And I look and I said, "Who is this?" He says, "Don't you recognize me? I'm your father." And we talked and he said, "Stay together because when you're together you have a much better chance of survival." And then also he said, "Stay alive so you can tell the world what they're doing to us."
You know, we're honoring those every single child, and we're trying to get 1.5 million.
The Butterfly Project inspires people of all faiths and backgrounds to have the courage to look at the Holocaust through the eyes, hearts, and hands of activism.
You kids should know what happened, so if something happened again in this magnitude, you should speak up.
Listening to the speakers, I've learned that if I don't do anything, then nothing will change.
Living through the past is hard, but it just shows that we have to push forward. And just seeing him smile and have like this bright eyes, it encouraged me a lot.
Talking about one person standing up and influencing someone else to stand up, it reminds me of what Rose was saying. She has hope for the future. She has hope that students like us will take what we've learned and do something with it.
Right?
It's not just
That's
a
the point.
Jewish project.
I mean, the main thing really is to get it out into schools that are not Jewish.
Pass out a card that you need to take a minute. This is the most serious part of the day. You're going to read the story about a child that did not live through the Holocaust, that was killed. In a short amount of time, 1.5 million children were murdered. Every single butterfly counts, and it represents a life.
Can you tell me more about how we can make an installation at our school?
This is what we needed, and you were worried. It's coming in.
And one word that connects everyone who has worked on this project is compassion. Compassion for all the people that suffered during this tragic time in our world's history, and compassion for those that are still suffering in many parts of the world today. Compassion in the heart of everyone here. And our hope is that when you leave this Children's Memorial, you might be inspired to learn more, to do more, and to be a voice for those who cannot speak any longer.
I definitely saw the joy that it brought to my students when they were able to say, I'm creating this butterfly in remembrance of a child who did not have the opportunity to live. I'm living for him, or I'm living for her.
We all start out being bystanders when we see someone in trouble. Then we have to make a decision. Do we remain a bystander, or do we try and help someone? Yes.
You try and help someone, guys.
Thank you.
He picked me up, and what they always said, all Jews have money. Give me the money, I'll take you to the Nazis. I said, I'm Polish and I don't have any money. And here comes my physical angel. The lady, the farmer, came out from the house to give me something to eat, and she saw him pulling me. So she came, I didn't know she knows him. So she came and she met him, and she with her finger was screaming at his face. You call yourself a good Christian? I see you in church every Sunday. Leave the child alone. And he did, and here I am.
I think it is very exciting and very meaningful for each of the children and the survivors who work with them today at the Museum of Tolerance to know that their butterflies are going to be displayed in Poland.
It was important to me, and I thought that it would be nice that on our building, the butterflies symbolize the children and grandchildren of the survivors that were able to do this down the road from Auschwitz. I think there's an important message there.
The people attending the festival put up almost 4,000 butterflies in just 3 days. And all of this happened right on the border between Poland and Germany.
Art is so powerful as a means of expression, as a means of connecting people, of responding to the world.
The Butterfly Project visited a place near the Gaza Strip in Israel where the kids were always afraid. A little girl who had stopped speaking started smiling and talking again after painting a butterfly.
Umanit?
Ma.
It's an artist? I think you're an artist. It's a dream of a teacher to affect your students' lives and hope that the world will become a better place. Maybe with these kids that are participating in this project.
This is continuing the work of Friedel and the others who work with the children at Terezin.
I just found out from your teacher that you are 11 years old, most of you. And I was 11 years old when I was taken to the concentration camp. I have with me the Jewish star, the original one that we had to buy. It was very hard for me to wear it right away because all my friends from school, they were avoiding me, talking to me. It was hard. My friend Ruti Schechter, born August 24th, 1930, slept next to me. And she was the most talented little girl. So many of my friends, they're not with us. 1.5 million Jewish children were murdered for that because they had the star. They were Jewish. This was the only reason that they were murdered. I feel it's important for children to know how important it was for freedom to let us know that we are not only numbers, that we have a name, that we were born. And her, through art, became now lately very well known because of our pictures, children pictures, that she was saving in a suitcase.
Prosíme pozor. Poslední vlak číslo 9865 ve směru Kladno-Ostrovec, který dále pokračuje ve směru Praha-Masarykovo nádraží.
They found my mother's goat dead and they took it. She took us one day to the windows and said, "It's a beautiful day. Look out. The sun is up. But what is important? What is behind those mountains? And behind those mountains is hope." If not Friedel Brandeis, probably the Nazis would throw away our children paintings. The poems, the paintings, and the children's opera are only things that are still here to remember the children of Terezin. What is so special about Friedel is that she didn't have her own children. We were able to be so close. I have Friedel living in me. All those teachers that they helped us to survive.
What the Butterfly Project does, it gives a voice back to the anonymous child. That is our duty, to remember not the number that was lost, but the human beings that were lost.
But it's really hard, really hard.
A.
A. Okay.
25893.
Meeting so many different people in the churches, in the schools, and the sensitivity that I've seen from all of the participants is just tremendous. And you're going to get, and this is the actual certificate that you're going to get. And take a look at the names so you can, at the end, we'll go around and read the names out loud.
I think that what's happening for the students is that they're reframing a tragedy into an opportunity to make the world a better place.
You can tell me what that first word is. Yeah.
She has hope for the future. She has hope that students like us will take what we've learned and do something with it. And I think that it's a responsibility for us as students and, you know, the future generation to do that.
All that what I see and I hear about the butterflies and about what it means to children to be part of it. This is a lesson for life.
Thank you, everybody, for sticking around for that amazing project that we are partnering with. I just want to take a few minutes to just tell you what our goals are. We started off with, just a second. Sorry about that. So I just want to just tell you a little bit about what our goals are for the Butterfly Project. We've started out with 100 butterflies that have been all sent out, and we are hoping to create our own memorial at the Jewish Federation that we would love to invite everybody out, and we will give out more information about it. A ceremony, hopefully when it's even a little bit warmer, and that's just going to be the start, the tip of this project. We're hoping that you guys can connect us with local schools, public schools, and private schools, anybody who's interested in this message of hope, and it's really so much more about than just about the Holocaust. Obviously, that was the kickoff, but it's just that, you know, that we won't be bystanders. We won't stand by while things are happening that are not okay. And it's to teach the kids that. And I think that's a super important way of spreading Holocaust education is through our children, the young generation who might not be exposed to it, and to do so in a way that's not scary, that's not something that we're afraid to talk about, but something that's hopeful, that we can teach them a lesson. And I'm optimistic that this is a start of something amazing. And we'd love for all of you guys, if any of you haven't painted a butterfly yet, to contact us. We're so happy to send that out. It's absolutely free for you. And we're just excited to see where this is going to go. Just taking South Bend to this new level of awareness, of hopefulness, and I'm just, you know, looking forward to sharing more information with you as the time comes. And I'd like to now segue over to the next portion of our program, which is our speaker, our main speaker. And in order to kick that off, we have with us today the Honorable Judge John Broden. Judge Broden has allowed us to use his courtroom for many years for our Holocaust naming ceremony. If you were with us last year, we mentioned that we were looking to move that ceremony in a different direction. It was usually held on a Monday, and most people can't get out of work to go down to his courtroom. But it was a really, really powerful ceremony that I myself attended 2 years ago. And we're so grateful for his support, for allowing that into his courtroom, and for just being an amazing friend for the Jewish community here in South Bend. So I'd like to invite Judge John Broden to give some opening remarks.
Very much, Shani. And first of all, it is wonderful not to see so many familiar faces, certainly familiar names. And as Shani said, I do want to begin by saying on behalf of the entire St. Joseph Circuit Court that we are honored to be a part of the Yom HaShoah commemoration. I did come across my notes in getting ready for this particular day, and I saw where, as Shani mentioned, I remember meeting with her and Bob Pfefferman, where we talked about perhaps bringing I should say they had the wonderful idea of bringing the commemoration into a local high school, perhaps Penn High School. And I think that meeting probably just predated by a few months the onset of the pandemic. So perhaps in 2022, that's something that can be revisited again, because I did think that was a wonderful idea. Second, I too am very much looking forward to Dr. Alan Rosen's remarks. In preparing, if you will, for this, I did purchase his book from Indiana University Press. I was on one of my Amazon boycotts, and so I went through a different source, and it arrived a little late. So I haven't gotten through it yet, but Dr. Rosen, you're probably aware of this, but you're a YouTube star, if you will. I had no trouble finding one of your wonderful lectures on this book. I think it was from November of 2019, also just a few months before the pandemic. You were at the Writer's Warehouse, the Writer's House, and I was able to watch that, and it was a fascinating lecture, and I'm so looking forward to hearing some expanded remarks today. And I guess I would like to state, sometimes I do this on the bench, and I'll do this in this format, is to just be candid. I was unaware of this, I'm just going to refer to it as an incredible, I guess I'll use the word story of the making of these calendars during the war, in concentration camps, what that symbolized, the resistance, the notion of hope, the importance of reclaiming time, of honoring time, honoring fast days while in a concentration camp. I can't tell you how moving that concept was to me, and something that, again, until I heard that Dr. Rosen was going to be our speaker today, I was unaware completely of that. And just the physical act of making these calendars, I think some are made on paper concrete bags, or bags that hold concrete, and so just how what a challenge that is, just even making the calendars. And then I also wanted Dr. Rosen to know from a local perspective, and I know many can attest to this, that the works of his mentor, the renowned Holocaust survivor, Dr. Eli Wiesel, are still prominently taught at John Adams High School. And I know that from having 3 children go through that high school, 1 currently and 2 in the very recent past. So again, I want to thank the Jewish Federation for continuing this important commemoration, even during the pandemic, and for bringing such a wonderful scholar to us through this format today. So thank you again, and very much looking forward to the remarks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Judge Broden. We really appreciate you coming and spending part of your Sunday with us. I'd like to introduce the next speaker, but my baby is having enough. I apologize for that. So let me do so really quickly. Dr. Rosen is joining us from Israel. Dr. Rosen is an author of or editor of 14 books. His most recent book, which is what he's here to discuss, is the Holocaust Jewish Calendars, and it's been awarded the Yad Vashem's International Book Prize. He has taught at universities, colleges, yeshivas, and seminaries in Israel and the United States, and he lectures regularly on literature and testimony at Yad Vashem's International School for Holocaust Studies and other Holocaust study centers. He was born and raised in Los Angeles, educated in Boston under the direction of Elie Wiesel. He lives in Jerusalem with his wife and children, and I'm very pleased to introduce for you today Dr. Rosen. Let's just see if we can. Dr. Rosen, we're just waiting for you to start your video. Let's just give him a moment there. I know it's later in Israel. So.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We can't see you.
You can't see me. Why is that?
Because it's Zoom, of course.
Because it's Zoom, of course. Let me see. Yeah. Start my video. I'm trying. Oh, there we go. Okay. Good. Now, I sent you what is a very simple PowerPoint just now. I also have it that I could screen share it myself. Are you seeing what I have on the screen?
Let's see. No, we just see you.
Okay.
I can share it on mine.
That'd be great.
Yeah, let
Thanks
me see if
much.
I can. Let me see if I can.
Okay,
Pull.
so let me start while you're doing that. Yes?
Okay, sounds
Ready?
good.
Great, thanks. And about a half an hour of remarks. Is that what we're looking toward? Half hour, 35 minutes?
Yes, that sounds good.
25 minutes, yeah.
That's
Okay.
perfect. Then we can leave time for Q&A if anybody has.
Yeah, with pleasure. Sophie Zollberg was born in 1923 in Munich, Germany, to a religious Jewish family. Her father was a bank clerk, a genius, as she has described him. Her mother, a housewife, she had a sister, and she went to the Talmud Torah in Munich for her education, which was very, very good. And it was only after Kristallnacht that her family then, for various reasons, Kristallnacht was the pogrom, the terrible breaking of the glass and of Jewish shops, and the terrible killing of 91 Jews, and sending thousands of others to concentration camps that happened in November 1938, that the family moved to Berlin. Sophie then was not able to continue with her schooling because Jews weren't allowed to do such. She, however, went to a Hakshara that was outside of Berlin in Neuendorf, which was a training center for Jewish youth to go to to Palestine, so-called then, to Israel. She was able then to study at the Hakshara, the training center. She was able to refrain from working on the Sabbath, on Shabbos, and to celebrate Shabbos with some 80 other Jewish youth, and astonishingly enough, this training center, which was the last of its sort in Germany, was still operating in spring of 1943 when it was shut down. The students, young people there, were then transferred to a school in Berlin. And on Erev Pesach, the day before Passover 1943, they were deported to Auschwitz. She arrived in Auschwitz the next day and was taken directly to Birkenau, which was the killing center of Auschwitz. She was able to be designated for labor, but then caught typhus and was very sick. And through what she terms miraculous intervention of the help of her friend, was transferred from Birkenau to the part of Auschwitz called Auschwitz I, where she worked as a laundress in laundering the undergarments, as banal as it might sound, the undergarments of the SS. And she lived there together with 100 other women. Apropos to our tale tonight, commemorating Yom HaShoah, but also taking us into Rosh Chodesh Iyar on the last day of the month of Nisan, month of miracles, that she, while in this women's dorm of Auschwitz I, made two calendars, two Jewish calendars, one for the year Tafshin Dalet, 1943-44, and one for the year 1944 to 1945. She was able to do this because even though it was in the center of a concentration camp, that there were in her women's dorm in Auschwitz I no selections. The food was somewhat better. The prisoners could wash regularly. And they could observe without the threat of life and limb at every moment, though couldn't do it overtly. She made her first calendar. Can we scroll down a little bit on the, are you able to do that, Mrs. Kramer? Yeah, let me.
Yeah, sorry, which slide did you want me to show?
Can you scroll down a few? I think it's the third.
Yeah, let me just share it first so everybody can see. Okay. Is it this one?
It's this one. No, further.
This
further
one?
down. Keep going. Keep going. There we are, right there. Yeah. So she, yeah, do you see the next one down? Next one down. Yes, there we are. She made the calendar so that the women in her group, 100 strong or so, would be able to celebrate the holidays. She did this, as I mentioned, for the year Tafshin Dalet, 1943, 1944. And the calendar she put in a bag with a piece of bread, and it was stolen. Not because of the calendar, seemingly, but because of the bread itself. This was already, I believe, after The next year had begun and she had made a second calendar, which she then never let leave her person. And this is a glimpse of that calendar from Tufshin Hay that Sophie Zollberg made in Auschwitz. When she was sent on a death march in Teves of Tufshin Hay, January 1945, she took the calendar with her. And though there were many perils that were involved on that death march to a labor camp, she was able to survive and was liberated on Lag BaOmer, the first days of May in 1945. She then set out to go to Israel. She arrived on Rosh Hashanah 1945 and has lived in Israel ever since. She, at the age of 97, lives lucid as can be in the Jerusalem suburb of Kiryat Sefer, tending to her dozens and dozens of grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and helping me with my investigations into not only her calendar, but into Jewish time overall. The mystery that we'll try to at least touch on toward the end of my remarks today is how could she, a woman marooned in Auschwitz, with no library, no Jewish books, meager utensils, no rabbi at her beck and call, compose Jewish calendars for 2 years and be able through them to allow the women she was with to be able, in whatever abbreviated way was possible, to observe the Chagim, the holidays, and Shabbos, Sabbath day, and even know when fast days were. So before going on, I want to say thank you to the Jewish Federation of St. Joseph Valley and its liaison, Shani Kramer, for being able to bring me from Jerusalem to you. And it's great to be with you, and especially because we're straddling the last days of the month of Nisan and Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the new Jewish month, and also commemoration of the Holocaust. So it's a very vivid, striking blend of different aspects of the Jewish calendar, all rolled into one. And we'll have a brief look at some of the ways in which those were given expression during the time of the war years and the Holocaust. And God willing, there'll be time and I would welcome questions. And this is as in the introductory remarks, it was mentioned that I have a book on the subject and called The Holocaust Jewish Calendars. And for those that might be interested, that would be another way to go further and more in depth. I found approximately 40 Jewish calendars that were composed during the war years. Those are, to my guess, a small sampling of what actually was composed. But like the people who so determinedly composed them, they were lost, they were buried, they were burnt, and we just don't have them. There may be some that turn up. And one of the catalysts for my investigation was to bring this into the focus of our concern and to have more calendars turn up And they have, and God willing, they will continue to do so. Those 40 are of various different kinds, as we will see, some handwritten like Sophie Zollberg's, others that were crafted on a typewriter in some labor camps, others in ghettos that were printed. And so they run the full gamut. Some were, most were in fact very small, but there were some larger versions. Some were plain, like Sophie Zollberg's again, but as we'll see when looking at Rabbi Shiner's shortly, that some were calligraphed and illustrated with great deftness and flourish. And my own motivation was the way to be able to return Jewish time to the commemoration, study, and knowledge of the Holocaust. By and large, Jewish time is absent, even though Jews in Europe, both devoutly religious and those that were less but culturally connected, led their lives according to two calendars, the Jewish and the Gregorian, or in Eastern Europe, the Julian calendar. So what I was trying to do was not to force the issue, but rather to be able to guide researchers, audiences, students to the reality that was. And we see the phenomenon then of the composing of Jewish calendars under such difficult conditions to be something that then reflects the passion and dedication to the Jewish calendar among Jews of all worlds and all stripes. This can even be seen when one considers the starting date of the Second World War, which most people know to be the September 1st, 1939. That fall day is easy to remember because it's the first day of a Gregorian calendar month, but it loses so much in translation because the German invasion of Poland on that day took place on the 17th day of Elul, meaning in the middle of the month that was preparing for the high holidays, where every day there was shofar blowing in the synagogue, there were special psalms that were being said. And so this erupted into the life of those preparations. It also was on a Erev Shabbos, a Friday morning, that the invasion began, that the bombing took place, and many Jews were caught in the marketplace preparing for Shabbos, for the Sabbath day, for buying their provisions that were necessary. It was further the year of 5699. So there was a transition in the offing to a new century. So just like those of us who are old enough to remember, which wasn't all that long ago, but going in the Gregorian calendar to the year 2000, there was a lot of brouhaha, a lot of hubbub. What would happen? And there always are messianic yearnings that are intensified during such times. So it was at this time that many, many Jews saw the invasion of Poland and the war that broke out as the harbinger of the new messianic era. Unfortunately, it was not to be, but that was the consciousness. And so returning Jewish time and Jewish calendar transforms our sense of what the days mean and reverberate in a different way. And that is true even now, because the war years of the Holocaust were from 5699 to 5705, meaning the most of the war took place during from Tufshin 5700 to 5705. We're today, as we know, in the year 5781. So we're still in the century of the Holocaust. It's not far away. It's not of another time and era of the past. It's close at the hand, and the lessons are profound for us. Important for looking at Sophie Zollberg's calendar and virtually all of the calendars, that the Jewish calendar was yoked to the Gregorian calendar, meaning we take for granted that, okay, if you have a Jewish calendar, you also have Gregorian calendar dates. But this was at a time that the world had turned against the Jews, where the non-Jewish world, whose Gregorian calendar it was, had seen the Jews as an arch enemy. Mad as it may have been, it was murderous. But that did not keep Jews from also harnessing the Jewish calendar to the Gregorian one and being able to say that even though the world was wanting to do away with us, we were not going to do away with the world. As I mentioned, that there were Jewish calendars of various shapes, sizes, descriptions. There were Jewish calendars made during the war in ghettos. The longest of the ghettos were in Poland. Ghettos were only in Eastern Europe, except for the Theresienstadt ghetto in Czechoslovakia, which we'll come to shortly. In those ghettos, there were calendars made, printed. There were also ghettos made in hiding. There were ghettos made in labor camps. And there were calendars made in labor camps. There were calendars like Sophie Zollberg's made even in concentration death camps. If we can go, Mrs. Kramer, back up a few rungs. A little bit more. Yeah, great. So we have here one of the ghetto calendars from the Lodz ghetto that is also from the year Tufshin Dalet, 1944. And in contrast to Sophie Zollberg's calendar that begins with the Jewish New Year of Rosh Hashanah, this calendar begins with the Gregorian New Year, January 1st. Yet we see that even though that is the case, this calendar, which was printed, and there were calendars of this sort made from the earliest days of the Lodz ghetto, 1940, 1939 even. And these calendars have the Jewish calendar on the right side, as we see the Gregorian calendar on the left side. The days are both with Hebrew letters and also with Yiddish names. And they also have the time, as we see at the bottom there on the right side, times for the entry of Shabbos, of candle lighting for the Sabbath day, and for the exit of the Sabbath day. So despite the fact that this is the Lodz ghetto, run essentially by not devout Jews, but culturally connected Jews. And that is a time when many in the ghetto are, uh, are starving. That calendars were produced in the number of approximately 6,000, circulated wide and far, were both wall calendars, pocket calendars, desk calendars, and remarkably, as we see on the January 6th, corresponds to the 10th day of Teves, which we know to be a fast day, which is listed here. We don't know if Jews actually fasted. No one was obliged to fast because the rations generally were so meager. But as my colleague, Professor Mark Kaplan said, that even if the Jews could not fast and were not obliged to, the calendars kept the fast for them. The calendars were also rendered in other ghettos. Astonishingly, even though there are these detailed calendars that we found in the Lodz ghetto for each and every year, that for the Warsaw ghetto, the most famous, the most exemplary, the largest, that we found no calendars, not in the archives, not in the ruins. And yet we know there were Jewish calendars printed in tiny flawed editions for the year Tufshin Gimel 1943, as Rabbi Shimon Huberman notes in his diary. So perhaps some will turn up, and even if not, we know that there was a mirror image of Lodz that took place in Warsaw to whatever degree it was possible. The transit camps of Westerbork, of Theresienstadt, were concentration camps to some degree. Certainly life was difficult. Transport sent those Jews on to killing stations. But the observance of Jewish ritual life, Sabbath, holidays, and others was not prescribed, it was not forbidden. In Theresienstadt itself, there were 8 synagogues functioning daily. There were prayers that were said, of course, in and out of those synagogues. There were classes study. There was those who made diligent effort to keep the highest standards of kosher eating. And so we also have examples of 3 calendars that were composed in Theresienstadt, one of which, if we can scroll down to the next, please. Yeah, great. This is called Luach Katan. As we see, it is also a calendar for the year Tufshin Gimel 5703, 1942, 1943. This calendar was typewritten in German, even though Theresienstadt was in Czechoslovakia. One of the main lingua francas there was German. And that's what the composer of this calendar chose to use and had available as a typewriter. The front page, as we see, is illustrated with a Jewish star, as well as with a famous portrait of Kever Rachel, of the burial place of Rachel, the matriarch. And though we don't know who composed this calendar, and we thus don't know why he or she chose to make Kever Rachel the frontispiece on the calendar, we can guess. Kever Rachel, just outside of Jerusalem here, is the center, is one of the holy sites that people go to lodge their prayers on regular occasions, but even more so at times of difficulty, times of hardship, times of desperation. And here, of course, in Theresienstadt, despite the possibility of Jewish observance, people were dying daily of illness and of starvation. And it was known that there were deportations going to killing centers in the East that one could find oneself on during this period of time. So to picture the gravesite of Rachel the matriarch here, who is seen by tradition as the most eloquent spokesperson for the fate of the Jews at times of desperation, that seemingly that's what the calendar maker had in mind. And not only as a general symbol, but it's my hunch that the calendar maker felt that the calendar itself was a kind of way of petition, a way of saying that despite the circumstances, we're going to observe to the best of our abilities. This calendar, in contrast to Sophie Zollberg's and numbers of others, is not a daily calendar. It highlights the Sabbath days, the festivals, as well as the fast days. And that's typical of some calendars of which this is representative. If we can scroll down to next page, please. Great. And maybe even the next page. Great, thank you. We see on this page that we find the 9th day of the month of Av, which is Tisha B'Av, the day which is for commemorating the destruction of the ancient temples in Jerusalem and for 3 other catastrophes in ancient Jewish life. And it is the paradigmatic, the model day of trying to repent in a way that will bring a good outcome to all of our deeds. It is a fast day, a 24-hour fast day, long, difficult. As we see, the date is there, but the space is blank, meaning the calendar maker seemingly with the idea that this was summertime, that the days were terribly long, that fasting would be outrageously overwhelming, that even though that other fast days up to this point are registered, are accounted for, here had reached a limit. The related to the Westerbork camp, there was a calendar rendered there by Yisrael Rabbi Yisrael Simcha Zellman, that he made similar to this on a typewriter. He then took it with him when he was deported. It's not in the sequence, so I'll just describe with a brief anecdote that Rabbi Zellman took it with him when he was deported to Bergen-Belsen. He survived the concentration camp, had the calendar with him, as well as a number of Torah writings that he had made during this time. He brought it with him to Manchester, England, after the war, where he lived until the 1960s, when he and his wife and family moved to Israel. And then in the late 1970s, when he passed away, his grandson told me that he made one special request, that the calendar he had made should be buried with him. Now, Jews don't generally do such things. It's not that we don't value our precious possessions, but it's not when we go to the travel to the next world, are buried and are in our, as are moving to the world of truth. We don't take anything with us generally. But he asked for this. And when I asked his grandson, so did it happen? He said, yes, it did. Which indicates all the different possessions he had. Of his Torah writings, he also had a Megillat Esther, a scroll of Esther, that was with him through the war. None of those things did he ask to be buried with him. What he asked for was a calendar. That should be it. And we presume it's because he's saying when he goes to the next world, that is his advocate. When he comes before the tribunal to say, what did you do with your years? He said, I crafted a calendar in the Westerbork camp that allowed the Jews to be able to keep the holidays to whatever degree. He's very explicit during the period we're in of saying that counting the Omer, something that we do every day during the last part of the month of Nisan, the month of Iyar, and the beginning of the month of Sivan. He said, every Jew can do this. Takes a minute. Even if you have to do this before it gets dark, do it. We also then, if we could scroll back up to the top, and here we have a remarkable example of a calendar that was crafted in hiding. Rabbi Shlomo Shiner was in hiding for 2 years. He and his wife and his 4 children with the family Matyas in the center of Poland, Dubrovna, Poland, for 2 years. Matyas, Mr. Matyas, had been a former employee of his, and when the Shiners came knocking on the door that they had nowhere else to go, they were taken in, given food, lodgings for 2 years, special bunker made. And during that time, Rabbi Shlomo and his sons crafted a calendar and a book of Psalms. Calendar for 2 years, 1943, 1944, Tavshin Dalet, and Tavshin Hey. This calendar, which begins on Rosh Hashanah, has Hebrew on the right side, Yiddish for the days, and Polish for the Gregorian months, the month of September here in Polish, and an added remarkable dimension, fantastic dimension, inconceivable dimension, is that Rabbi Shiner also color-coded the calendar, meaning every Sabbath is color-coded red. Every holiday is color-coded red. Days of half holiness, Chol Hamoed, are colored half red. But that's not yet the end of the color coding story. He also color coded Sundays and Christian festivals with a red. How could he do it? He was aware that the Polish community of Jews was being decimated by Poles as well as Germans. And it would seem that it would be the farthest thing from one's mind. And yet it was, in some sense, the closest, because his Gentile neighbors had taken them in, were providing for them, made it so they could survive the war. And so it would seem, and I'm only guessing here, I didn't hear this, I met with his son. The author was no longer alive, but I met with his son, and I hadn't noticed this when I met with him and wasn't able to reach him again to check and see if he knew. But my hunch is that he did this to be able to, for the ways of peace with the family, to show his gratitude, was to indicate that he was sensitive to their needs, that they who would look on what he made, that supplied the materials to make them, would not feel any hostility, but quite the contrary, caring. And this is a calendar also that doubled as a ledger where he recorded the killings, the murder of Jews in Yiddish red script throughout the 2 years to memorialize them, just as we're endeavoring to do. So we return to the question that I posed at the beginning regarding the great calendars of Sophie Zollberg. And it may be possible to ask this question of others, but it comes most forcefully to the center with hers, stranded in Auschwitz as a prisoner, without a single book, without a single rabbi at hand. She composed these calendars. How did she do it? So she told me very straightforwardly that she had a teacher in her school in Munich whose name was Julius Kissinger, a cousin of the more famous Henry. He was a religious Jew, an outstanding teacher, as was his brother at the school. And he taught her through several of the grades. When she was 10 years old, in their class, he drilled his students with the precepts of making a Jewish calendar. And even though they never actually made a calendar, that his drilling the students and her own absorption of those lessons was put to the test and to the practice 10 years after, when she was interned in Auschwitz. And that was at a time when her teacher, Julius Kissinger, had already been deported and terribly murdered on the 5th day of Kislev, being shipped from Munich to Kovna and executed there. So even though she didn't know it at the time, that her calendars that she made for those 2 years became the testimony to he, as a teacher, conveyor of Jewish tradition, that she was keeping alive. And it seems to me that that becomes a model for us, both in terms of memorial and also in terms of being able to persevere, to keep alive, to be able to know with exquisite detail, tradition, to make it come alive. God willing, not in such devastating places we shouldn't find ourselves, but wherever we may be, that the skills, the desire, the yearning, the inspiration are present. It was only when I studied this that I was able to tell Sophie Zolberg the date of her teacher's demise. And now, every year, she lights a yahrzeit candle in his name. May his memory be blessed. May all those who compose these calendars be able to be blessed for the blessings they gave us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rosen. That was really, really interesting and really amazing that people had the fortitude to even care honestly about, about time during such a difficult time for themselves. So very inspirational, very inspirational. And I'd just like to offer if anybody has any questions for Dr. Rosen. Dr. Rosen, you had studied under Elie Wiesel, is that correct?
I did indeed. I had the privilege of doing that. I was first an undergraduate, and then a graduate student. I was in his classroom for 10 years, 8 of which I was his assistant, and we remained very close for nearly 40 years, and I published 4 books up to this time on his work, and the 5th book of his Torah lectures, unpublished Torah lectures, is due out that I edited in November. So we're very close.
Amazing. If anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask Dr. Rosen, either about the subject or even about learning under Elie Wiesel, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask, or you can put it in the chat if you're more comfortable. We'll give everybody a couple of minutes, see if anyone has anything to say. I think this was a very interesting topic. Like we mentioned, time in itself, you can't make it stop, right? And you can't make it go backwards, but using it in the best way possible, I think that really is a goal that I would like to take out of today's lesson. We can't fix what happened in the Holocaust, we can't go back, but we can see the tremendous efforts that people made to make sure that they could still continue their traditions, even though they're going through a really horrific time. I think that's a wonderful lesson for us all. If nobody has any questions, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. And just remember to keep the hope going. And that's what we're going to hopefully do at the Federation, and keep an eye out for our emails on how we're going to take these projects that we've discussed today and turn them into a beautiful memorial at the Jewish Federation site. Thank you all again. Wishing everybody a wonderful day.
I see that Moshe Kruger has his hand up.
I do see that now. Oh, Moshe, go ahead. Oh, there we are. There we are. Dr. Rosen, this is Moshe Kruger. He is the executive director at the Jewish Federation.
Great.
Yeah, shalom, Dr. Rosen. Thank you so
Shalom.
much for this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. With me is my wife, Professor Karen Richman at the University of Notre Dame, and she would like to ask you a question.
Great.
Shalom. Thank you so much for just a really moving and enlightening lecture. So in anthropology, we think a lot about context and relativism, and there's also been quite a bit of work on the actually the construction of time, and it relates. So I was thinking about this during your lecture, and we've thought there's quite a bit of work on the difference between abstract, quantitative reckoning of time versus concrete, cyclical reckoning of time.
Mm-hmm.
and with all the, moral, economic, social implications of this, not to mention religious. I was wondering if that that question or that domain had been of interest to you at all, and if it has anything to say to your work.
Thanks very much for such a rich and broad linking question. Yeah, I think it's very relevant within the context perhaps that we're speaking here. I would just say that that a strong impetus for my pursuing this kind of investigation was that the way that time was dealt with very abstractly, meaning that even when there was an idea that there may be such a thing as Jewish time, that was not at all seen within the very material reality of the calendars. And so there was a kind of a obstruction, if one will, between thinking of time and the way in which the Jewish calendar is such a crucial access point to time for Jewish communities. So what I was interested in doing was to try to emphasize that link, emphasize that Jewish time could really not be talked about abstractly, that it needed to be spoken of in conjunction with a calendar, and that one had to not only just point to the material cultural aspect of these calendars, but even read the calendars for the detail, for the specificity that they manifest. So that that was really my goal. And while it doesn't do justice to the theoretical and larger context of your question with regard to anthropology in general right now, that I think it really helps to see that that was a very fundamental motivation for my project. So much so that the main article on Jewish time as a form of resistance did not mention once the Jewish calendar. So that this obstruction somehow had to be surmounted. And that's what I've tried to do by creating an archive of calendars, trying to develop a way of reading them and teaching about the Jewish calendar itself. I'm wondering, does the Jewish Federation of St. Joseph's Valley, a very practical question, does it publish a yearly Jewish calendar?
No, not that I'm aware of. No, we do not have a Jewish calendar that we publish ourselves. But perhaps we could work with you to create a project to do so.
That would be great. I would love nothing better, truly, because I see that that's the how to say, a very straightforward lesson of dwelling with these calendars. Right. Is the way in which individuals and communities and institutions took it upon themselves, even in such dire straits, to live with the specificity of that year's Jewish calendar and disseminate it to whatever degree they could. So let's team up.
Yeah. So Dr. Rosen, let me just say that I think it'd be really a such a significant way to one, recognize your work, and here in South Bend, in the heartland of the United States, to do something perhaps in a different dimension when it comes to Holocaust education, to as you brought out in your lecture, this idea of sacred time, this idea of holy time. Perhaps there could be a way for us to move forward with some sort of collaboration on a calendar project in conjunction. If you heard what preceded you with the butterfly project, another way to touch the various community members and the broader community as we remember the Holocaust and the children. So I see some synergy there. And again, I just want to thank you on behalf of the Jewish community and all who are able to attend today's lecture. Toda rabah, thank you very much, and Godspeed.
Thank you. Very moving words, and I return the thanks, and I'm especially moved by the imaginative future possibilities that you're envisioning, and will, God willing, work together to see it happen in a form that will be richly suitable, God willing, for your community.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.